This video continues from the previous video. So in 1998, the authors of this paper, the Universal Design File, Designed for All People of All Ages and Abilities, they outlined 7 principles of what has become known as universal design in North America. It's actually not just North America. When I was doing some research to put this PowerPoint together, I have found that there are multiple resources for universal design in Europe as well. So the approach seeks to create, this is what we do, right? To create environments that are usable by all people to the greatest extent possible. It's very easy to think about what we need because we live in our own bodies. What we often don't do, and because it's difficult to, it requires more thinking, is to think about other people and other people that could use a space. And just because your client is one way today doesn't mean that they will be in a different situation tomorrow. And so, obviously budgetary issues restrict this to some extent, and an open-mindedness to them that their situation could change is difficult. It's a very difficult conversation to have, no doubt. No one wants to think about what happens if I have to be in a wheelchair, and it may be temporary. But one of the things that we can do, or what if something happens to someone I know who comes to live with me? How am I going to, make sure that they are comfortable in their new home? And there are some things we can do in the beginning so that retrofit later on is less burdensome and less destructive. So here's what they came up with. According to the universal design approach, all spaces should encompass equitable use. And what equity means is that if you have a disability, you are given something others are not to raise your platform so that you have the same comfort and rights and accessibility as someone without. You're not giving anyone an advantage, you're just making them equal. And equality and equity are not the same thing. They're often used interchangeably. Equality means everybody gets to see. Let's put it this way. Equality means that everybody has a kitchen. Equity means that someone in a wheelchair has counters that allow them to cut or work the same as someone who isn't in a wheelchair can cut or work at a standard counter. Flexibility in use. So we're going to accommodate a wide range of preferences and abilities. Even without disabilities, a 4-foot, 10-inch tall person has a different range of reach than someone who is 6'4". Simple and intuitive use. We want design to be easy to understand regardless of the user's experience, knowledge, language, or current concentration level. Things should not be difficult. I don't know how many times you guys have seen articles in social media, and they're like how things were designed. And one of them is the pop top for a can of soda, that once you pop it, you could put a straw through the hole. That's what the hole is there for. Well, how was I supposed to know that? I mean, I guess now that I know it, it seemed intuitive, but I didn't know that. I mean, it's not exactly straw shaped. It's oblong, and I thought they put it there so that I could, when I was opening it, right, it's easier to open with the hole there. Also, you save on material. There's less material. I just thought it was that. So we have to make it so that design is clear and wayfinding is easy. Perceptible information. The design communicates necessary information effective to the user regardless of the conditions or the user's sensory abilities. And that is why the ADA has code for buildings. The ADA is a law. It's a federal law. We are obligated to follow it. And we shouldn't try to resist anyway because it's good. I mean, they really worked it out. And so every year it gets updated, and they help tell us what people need. And so as you're learning design, one of the things that you're going to learn how to do is to incorporate the ADA in your design so that your habitats are accessible. Tolerance for error. And that, we've talked about that there is a risk for injury. And so when we have tolerances, and tolerance means that you have a range of flexibility, that it minimizes any hazards and the adverse consequences of accidental or unintended actions. Low physical effort. So the design can be used efficiently and comfortably and with minimum of fatigue. We already saw that with the kitchen, the kitchen triangle. You don't want someone traveling back and forth around things endlessly until they're so tired that cooking in the kitchen becomes a chore. You want to make their lives easier. Size and space for approach and use. Appropriate size and space. Now, this has to do with considering travel pathways for one. Has to do with reach, has to do with use. And so one of the things we're frequently going to talk about is going to be circulation space, and how that someone in a wheelchair, because generally their footprint is larger or is the largest one. I'm trying to think of anything that's larger than that. But somebody in a wheelchair, their footprint's larger, so they need more space for turning around. So if you are specifically designing for someone who is in a wheelchair, then their pathways are going to be much wider. Now, in general, there are minimums, and that is the law, and they require 32 inches for a doorway. A doorway can't be narrower, and that is the narrowest point, than 32 inches. And that is so that somebody with a wheelchair can get through. Okay, so we're going to go through these in a bit more detail. So, principle 1, equitable use. And the guidelines are this: provide the same means of use for all users, identical wherever possible, equivalent when not. And so here's an example: 0-step entrance into a house. You see the house on the left has steps. Someone in a wheelchair or someone who has difficulty walking for some reason could not get up those steps, at least not easily. Right? It would be an effort to get them up the steps. The house on the right has no impediment to someone very easily getting in that house. And this detail down here at the bottom is a section. If we were to take a chainsaw through this door, or through the house, right through the wall and the floor, and pull this part away and then look at what's left, it would look like this. And they show you how to create this gradual slope. And this, you want the slope so that if it rains on this, it runs off. You don't ever want anything to be flat. Okay, and I mean, this is attractive. There's nothing wrong with this. If there's also another way in, maybe there's a ramp over here. And I don't know, it's possible. It's hard to tell. There's railing here and a railing here. So, but it's possible you could have a ramp. Now, the one thing that they will tell you about doing that is that it says if you're in a wheelchair, you have a secondary entrance and you can't use the main entrance, and that can be frustrating to people who are in that situation. Often when you see ramps like that, they're added after the fact to provide an accommodation for people to bring the building up to code. Flexibility in use. You know what? I would love to have that in my kitchen, and I'm not in a wheelchair. And it's for people who maybe want to sit down when they're cutting. So these kitchen countertops that can accommodate both standing and seated positions help take away that concern about fatigue. Also, it helps people to cut. Say someone has a condition where they're shaking, and by sitting down and leaning on this counter, they can cut more easily without hurting themselves or injuring themselves. And we have now made their lives easier because now they don't have to worry about how are they going to feed themselves, because it's very expensive to buy takeout food or prepared meals. It's much cheaper to cook your own food. And so we now can allow people or give people the opportunity to take care of themselves in a way that's comfortable and reduces any injury they might sustain. Simple and intuitive use. I love that. Look at this, beautiful. See, there's a thing I think that or a misconception that universal design is not attractive. That's beautiful. I would use that. I would love that. You know, I would love to have the little bench that I could sit on. I love those shower things. And here it's, again, it's zero problem, zero entry blocks. You can, if you're in a wheelchair, you can roll right in. If you're having problems stepping up, you don't have to step over anything to get in the tub. You know, I mean, it's difficult, say, if you've just had surgery for some reason and you need to get in the tub and you can't lift your foot that high, or you're dizzy. There's just a whole lot of different conditions that people face, either temporarily on a long-term basis, that these types of designs will accommodate. And then if you go to sell your house, it actually makes your house more valuable. Okay, we're going to stop here and continue in the next video.